Welcome to the Blue Security Podcast, a weekly podcast for information security defenders, where we bring you discussions on best practices, tools, and implementation for enterprise security. Now, here are your hosts for today's show, Andy Jha and Adam Brewer.
Welcome to this week's episode of the Blue Security Podcast. I'm Andy, your host.
I'm Adam, your co-host.
So this is wrapping up our 5th year for the Blue Security Podcast. So next week will be the start of a brand new season, entering our 6th year of doing this. And we're going to wrap this up by talking about our favorite topic, as usual, is identity. There's been a few things that have been released recently in public preview for Entra. Before we get into that, let's do our standard disclaimer, since we are going to be talking about some Microsoft technology. Adam, if you will.
Andy and I both work for Microsoft in our field security sales. We do this show outside of work on our own time and self-fund the show. So Microsoft has no direct editorial control over the show or its content. But as always, we want to remain gainfully employed, and we want our listeners to be aware of that potential to color our conversation, right? Of course, Andy and I try to do the show as independently and as scholarly as possible, looking at facts and dealing with those sorts of information. So since we'll be talking about Microsoft stuff, just thought you should know that as listeners and viewers. But with that, on with the show.
Yeah. So we have talked about the solution called Entra Internet Access and Entra Private Access. And both those have been kind of coined as global secure access, and it falls under Entra. And those two technologies are the SASE solution, the secure access, secure edge solution, scoped VPN, or, the proxy for filtering as well. So those two things, they use the global secure access client that's installed. And it's been GA for a while now. We talked about it when it first came out. But what is brand new with it in preview is something called Universal CAE, which is Continuous Access Evaluation. And so that's in preview with GSA. Now, we have talked about CAE before, but let's just do a quick review of what CAE is. So it's a security mechanism that continuously monitors and evaluates the user access to systems and data even after logging in. Instead of relying on the static access tokens, it allows for real-time enforcement of access policies. Now, different types of tokens, right? You have your access tokens, which are issued. The session tokens are the ones that are long-lived, and those, as long as you're touching them and logging in to the application or the system, they will continue to have rolling access for a very, very long time. But the access tokens get issued only for about 60 to 90 minutes generally. And so once they're issued, part of the problem that security teams run into is that if they offboard someone or an attacker gets an access token, there's no way to revoke those tokens. It's just there for valid access until it expires. You can revoke session tokens, but you can't revoke the access tokens. Once they've been issued, they're valid for that time period until they expire. So that's kind of an issue. And so come along with CAE, Continuous Access Evaluation, which is based on an open protocol called OpenID Continuous Access Evaluation. And this has been implemented with conditional access and Entra for a while, but the biggest thing is that it's only available for certain applications. So it has to be coded in to the app to support CAE. So for example, with Microsoft, natively we have Exchange Online, SharePoint, and Teams. And other companies have implemented CAE for some of their applications as well. But as you can imagine, most organizations have more than just those 3 apps, right? And so if you want CAE, the continuous access evaluation, for all your apps, it's a little bit difficult. Well, now we have that solution. So the biggest change is that now CAE is implemented with the GSA client. And so the token is evaluated every time a connection is made to a new application. And CAE, or Universal CAE, I guess that's the new term for this part, is Universal CAE will revoke or revalidate that network access in near real time whenever Entra ID detects a change to the identity. Like I said, traditional Entra ID CAE does require each workload or each application to adopt those special libraries as part of that OpenID. And it's usually, right now, it's limited to first-party applications, at least for Microsoft, right? So With this, you're extending that CAE benefit to every application that you're using with GSA, the Global Secure Access, without having to require the application to be CAE aware. So now your entire org, as long as you're using GSA, and you can forward traffic through Entra Private Access or Entra Internet Access, regardless of the application. So as long as you're using that app with the GSA client, you have that CAE benefit, meaning you turn off that identity, Entra makes a change, and all of a sudden, regardless of how long that access token is there, the access will get revoked. So I can put this in an example, and then Adam, I'll give you some time to scope your thoughts. But think about this, right? Like, let's say you're an employee and you're using a VPN with an identity that's synced from Active Directory to Entra, and then you need to offboard that employee. Or maybe it's, we talked about a couple of weeks ago, there was a contentious firing where that guy, had access and there was a delay in turning off his account, and he was able to kind of delete a bunch of files for this company. Maybe it's that. So in that case, again, with traditional, you might turn off their identity in AD. You might have to do a manual dir sync up to the cloud to get that to sync, unless you want to wait, which could, again, take anywhere from 30 to 60 minutes. That change has to propagate across the Active Directory domains, the DCs. And then in Entra, that token was already issued. So you're looking at, again, anywhere between 30 to 90 minutes, depending on when that token was issued. User gets their access revoked. But if you're forwarding traffic through GSA and you have this turned on, the universal CAE, that user will lose access as soon as Entra detects a change in their account with near real time. So really, really good benefit if you're already using something like Entra Private Access or Entra Internet Access. Now you have that near real-time capability of cutting off access to an attacker or to an employee that doesn't need access anymore.
This is pretty straightforward, and you walked through it really well, Andy. The continuous access evaluation is really cool, but has been limited to mostly first-party applications. Now, they're some of the most commonly used and arguably some of the most sensitive. So that's been a tremendous security benefit. And I do want to point out, because there's this perception a lot of times that Microsoft still does a lot of proprietary stuff. And you mentioned this, but I'll reiterate it. The work that the Entra ID team did to implement continuous access evaluation, although originally was for our own benefit, right? For Microsoft's benefit to have a really cool feature to talk about, they did share it back with the broader OpenID Connect ecosystem and helped implement an open standard so that anyone who implements OpenID Connect can have continuous access evaluation, which is pretty cool, actually, and something I don't want to be completely glossed over, because as opposed to having some competitive differentiator, it was seen as it's better to go contribute this back to the community, and that proverbial rising tide that lifts all ships is happening, which is, I think, great. So this is pretty clear that if you want this for all your applications, then why wouldn't you? Let's say you use Entra ID as your primary identity and access management solution. And Andy, you gave a couple examples, but what if you use Salesforce as your CRM? Obviously, extremely sensitive stuff in there. And if you configure Entra ID and your conditional access policy so that access to Salesforce must go through global secure access, now you have effectively brought continuous access evaluation to a third-party application like Salesforce. And now if you do, in the example you gave, Andy, have a contentious termination, or you have a malicious actor who's taken over an account and you realize it and you need to get them out because maybe they're deleting records in Salesforce, now you can do that in near real time, as opposed to having that 60-minute or longer gap, depending on how Salesforce has implemented their SAML tokens and all that sort of thing too. So some pretty tremendous benefits. It's at the end of the day, it's wrapping it. You're wrapping it with another solution. And because it's implemented through the identity provider, and I think that's kind of the secret sauce here, which felt awkward at first. Because when Microsoft first announced, hey, we're going to do these SASE implementations and we're going to go compete with the Zscalers and the iBosses of the world, it always seemed odd. Why is Entra doing this? And I think the strategy is really coming to light that Microsoft saw this as it's still at its core related to access, which means it needs to be part of the identity and access management platform. And that's pretty novel, but I think ultimately the right approach. And we're starting to see that come to light with the implementation of things like this, to where you can extend this pretty tremendous security benefit where you're moving the granularity of being able to terminate access from 60 minutes to 1 minute or less. Is pretty sizable benefit. So very interesting. I don't have a huge awareness of what the competitive landscape looks like here. So I don't know if, again, the Zscalers and iBosses and others of the world have implemented something similar, but certainly something to keep an eye on. And certainly a pain point that I'd be willing to bet most of our listeners and viewers have dealt with. Almost everyone has dealt with a difficult termination where management wanted to ensure that that person's access was cut off immediately, and you then got into this awkward conversation where you're talking about refresh tokens and access tokens. And wouldn't it just be better if you could say, I got you, when you give the word, we will cut it off? And it actually is. And that's the reality that this brings to light. And so that's a positive thing. And I'll be curious to see how this propagates and impacts other solutions over time.
Yeah, and also it's integrated with conditional access. I don't know if I mentioned that, but continuous access evaluation is a session condition that you can check off, and it's been there for a while, but just for those who might not know, you can use this as a condition as part of your conditional access policy. So very good overall, definitely something that will be extremely helpful to security teams. This next one is also part of the GSA platform. A few weeks ago we mentioned that the threat intelligence solution, the Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence, would now be included at no additional cost. It used to be something that Microsoft was selling, but we're no longer selling it. It's just going to be included as part of the Defender stack, and customers will get benefits of that. This is another one of those benefits where we are now rolling threat intelligence into GSA. And so the entire threat intelligence platform, all the stuff that we get will be included as part of that, the Entra internet access. And if you are running traffic through the GSA client, internet access will now be able to block any type of traffic. You'll be able to create threat profiles. So that's kind of new as well. You can create threat profiles. You can have exceptions. You can block categories. You can block specific IOCs if you want. But as part of it, we have this huge threat intelligence platform, and you can pick categories like botnets and phishing sites, and you can just block based on category, based on our threat intelligence that we get as part of our huge network. So you got that integration now. That's also in preview. Most importantly, you don't need TLS inspection to do it. If you aren't using TLS inspection, you will only get kind of the top level domain level indicators and not the full URLs. It's a contentious topic within the security community whether TLS inspection is actually beneficial or not beneficial. But a lot of people still want it. Some people think it's great. Some people don't. However you think, you don't need it for threat intelligence. You will get some benefit as part of it. If you are using TLS inspection, you're going to get obviously a more deep packet inspection. And I'm not sure if we mentioned this on the show at some point, but TLS inspection is now included and it's in preview for Entra GSA as well. So it wasn't something that launched when it first went in to general availability, but if you want to do that, you can do that now for Entra private access. So yeah, just another great example of how, as part of the Defender stack, you're getting the benefits of threat intelligence at no additional cost.
It's amazing how quickly this showed up after we just covered it a week or two ago. And Andy mentioned, without going into a lot of detail, but I'll unpack this a little more. Microsoft loves to talk about these just massive numbers of threat signal that comes in every single day. And the number is now 84 trillion threat signals per day. And it's crazy because I had to look up what's the next number when you get to the 1,000 of those, right? It's quadrillion is the next one. Quadrillion, it follows trillion. And it's like I had to look it up. I didn't even know what that was, because if you want to quote a monthly number, it's, a certain number of quadrillion signals per month, which is just bonkers. And part of the reason why is because Microsoft still does have a suite of consumer facing services, Outlook.com, the artist formerly known as Hotmail, obviously all the MSN properties, and of course, Xbox, and then all the enterprise offerings between Azure infrastructure and Microsoft 365 and Dynamics 365. There's one of the largest gaming networks, one of the largest commercial clouds, obviously still pretty large consumer services that have a lot of mass appeal as well. There's just a lot of threat intelligence to see. And then there was that acquisition of Risk IQ now almost 5 years ago. And they brought a threat intelligence platform to bear as well. That was really great, especially with external attack surface management. And so doing all of that work for many years now has also helped build out this platform. So this is a nice benefit where you can write policy that leverages that threat intelligence to protect your users at machine speed and at massive scale without any real human intervention, which is always the win. We're looking for letting humans do what humans do best, letting machines do what machines do best. And this is an example of that. So another interesting benefit, and you mentioned, the plus or minuses of TLS inspection. I know I'm generally been bearish on TLS inspection, but that was when you had to stand it up on premises. And I feel like for most organizations, that's more attractive attack surface versus the benefit it derives. But if it's being run at scale by a professional organization that's their sole purpose is to harden and protect this, I think that's different. And then it becomes, I think, potentially more valuable, as opposed to having some sort of device or devices on your network that obviously have very attractive information passing through their memory. That is a whole different ballgame than having someone else secure that. So same thing with like nowadays, and Andy, I believe we've even said this out loud on the show, you basically shouldn't be running Exchange anymore. Like no one should be running Exchange server if you at all can avoid it. I understand there are some regulatory reasons why you may still have to in very, very limited circumstances, but if you don't have an like ironclad regulatory reason to do it, you shouldn't be doing it. And kind of the same thing with TLS inspection. If you want it, now you have options to go get it or someone else runs it for you. And that is a whole different argument to me than running it yourself. I'm just, that gives me the willies, just having that kind of data pass through. Because again, like literally credentials are going to be passing through the memory of that system. And if I'm an attacker and I can overtake it, it's extremely attractive. So that always concerns me. I mean, I think it was Swift on Security, who's a great follow on the platform formerly known as Twitter, X, was making the argument another day that an EDR is effectively a rootkit that you trust. Like
it is, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like a remote access Trojan that relies on you trusting that vendor to ship quality updates and those sorts of things. And that's all true as well, right? So we always need to be careful with security of we are installing very high privilege, very attractive targets where we need to rely on the trustworthiness of them. So I'll get off my tangent on that, but I know I've talked about it negatively, but I think in this scenario, it's more justified to be used. And if you do have it turned on, then this threat intelligence integration gets even better. So that's pretty neat as well. And again, these are kind of two things where it's just improving. It's not game changing, right? But it's that incremental improvement over time where, Andy, as we look to close the door on our fifth season of doing the show and 5 years doing the show, you think about how far we've come and how far we still have to go. But it's so funny. And I know we've said it on the air many times that when we started this show, one of our largest concerns was, would we ever run out of things to talk about? And that has never been a problem since we started. And it's, I want to give a shout out to Andy. Andy selects the topics. Andy writes the show notes. Andy prepares the rundown every single week. And it's become our dynamic that I kind of show up and react to whatever he's prepared in near real time. And so Andy's the straight man and I'm kind of the color commentator. And I'm reacting to it in real time, which gives you more of a natural reaction and unfiltered reaction, which I think is why people like our show. At least I hope it is. But Andy, I just want to thank you for all your hard work over the last 5 years of prepping the notes and preparing the show and selecting the subjects. It's It's been a real pleasure doing this. And I, at this point, can't imagine not doing this show. It truly is, we say, a labor of love, but I love doing the show. I love doing it with you. And so to all our listeners and viewers, thanks for being on this journey with us. It's been amazing. We're not going anywhere, at least not anytime soon. We've got a guest lined up next week to kick off season 6 of the show. And so thanks for listening and watching. As Andy always says, it's my turn to say it too. I can't believe it's been 5 years. And, you know, our commitment was when we started this show in the middle of COVID, when a lot of people were starting podcasts, was we're going to deliver a show week in and week out. And some weeks that's harder than others, but that's our labor of love back to you. So again, thanks for being part of the Blue Security Podcast community, and thanks for listening and watching as always. And Andy, if you want to take us home.
Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, this wouldn't be a great show without you either, Adam. It'd just be me talking to a camera. So thanks for being here, and thanks for being my partner in this. I do want to just make a quick comment on, the TLS inspection. I remember doing a master's paper on TLS inspection and why it wasn't great. And the things that you talked about of like how it used to be, like if you used to have a network appliance that's on-prem, and then, you would inject essentially an attacker in the middle, certificate to see the traffic. And vendors used to be terrible at it. The certificates might be downgraded in, encryption, and you would depend on OS level updates to upgrade those, and those wouldn't come very quickly. But now with, SaaS and it being kind of a service, I've deployed Zscaler at multiple companies and done TLS inspection there. This is pretty much the same thing. It's as a service. The certificates are going to be up to date. It's a one-click configuration. You don't need to do a whole lot. So I think, we've come a long way in that too. And
100%.
Since 99.9% of our traffic is encrypted, the attackers can easily use that to hide malicious things. So it's probably a better thing. If I was at a company and I was deploying it, and like my boss, CISO or whoever asked me, should we do this? I would probably say, yeah, this is a good idea.
Yeah.
I've done it with Zscaler. I've done, I would do it with Entra too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would do it with Zscaler as well. And my point was, and I was thinking more of the old school approach when people used to hairpin all their traffic back through on-prem, so they could decrypt it with some sort of on-network appliance. And I just think that's too attractive of a attack surface, frankly, for anyone to run themselves. Outside of, again, a very well-funded company that has 24/7 monitoring and support and can do it at the right level that it requires, which is basically no enterprise outside of a dedicated someone who's getting paid to do it, kind of thing. And also the hairpinning traffic thing is problematic too, because nowadays with modern content delivery networks and how services are engineered and how they're architected, like Microsoft 3, a lot of global services, they want to bring you on their private fiber network as soon as possible, and then run you through that. That's how Microsoft does it. And so our guidance on M365 is very clear. Do not hairpin traffic for Microsoft 365. Let it egress to the internet as soon as possible and let it directly traverse our network. And when you use the global secure access, those performance commitments can still be met. And so that's another benefit of that too. It's built in. Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's just another one of those things, that old school way of doing it. That's the thing I was talking about and kind of raging against the machine against. But to your point, if someone's like, yeah, we use Zscaler, are you cool with us doing TLS decryption? I would say absolutely yes. They run a tight ship. They have a great service. Nothing but respect for a company that's delivered a great product for many years now and has earned their stripes. Zscaler does great work. And any of those competitors in that space, I think almost all of them, again, running a SaaS type service, are trustworthy enough to do this. So did want to just clarify my comments.
Might have something. So anyone that's running, and even like when you talk about hairpinning traffic, like with Zscaler, if you ever actually buy the product and deploy it, the solution engineer that works with you is like, click this button because it bypasses all of M365's traffic. So they recommend, just like we recommend, that all your M3 traffic bypasses their proxy and just goes straight to the internet. So, and it's a one-click configuration in their environment too. So it's definitely, and you don't have to like maintain all the endpoints and IP addresses and URLs. They do that for you. So just like we do with Entra Internet Access, right? It's just natively built in that it's going to go straight to our services and be optimized.
Yep.
So
Zscaler, I mean, we had folks from Zscaler on this show
mm-hmm.
in one of our early years of doing it because they were and still are a Microsoft partner. And Microsoft to this day is still debuting technologies that partner with them closely. I forget what was a recent rollout, but there was something, and I think it was something Entra, maybe something to do with Global Secure Access, where there was like a partnership where you could use them, but I don't remember. But the point is, I just wanted to circle back on the TLS point, just because I know we had specifically talked about it, and I wanted to clarify our comments, for the modern age, effectively.
Exactly. A lot has happened, in the last 10 years with that. So
heck yeah.
All right. Well, wrapping up this show. Next week will be the kickoff for our 6th year. We have a guest coming, so stay tuned for that. But thanks for watching and listening. As always, the links to the documentation that we used for the show will be in the show notes, as well as our information, our contact information, if you have any questions or topics you want us to talk about in the future. Thanks. We'll talk to you guys next week.
Thank you for listening to the Blue Security Podcast. Please check out the show notes, catch up on episodes you may have missed, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Find Andy on Twitter @AJaw0 and Adam @AJ Brewer. See you at our next episode.